Hello, everyone, and thank you for joining us, and welcome to our webinar. Today's topic is the top 5 ransomware variants in 2019 and how to protect against them. My name is Marilyn Shepard, Head of Channel Sales with Corum, and I will be your moderator today. A few housekeeping items before we get started. You are automatically muted upon entry, and if you have questions throughout the webinar, please enter them into the questions box, and we'll answer them at the end of the session. We will follow up with you directly should we run out of time. Also, the webinar is being recorded and the link will be available after today's call. Please reach out to the Quorum channel team or your Quorum sales representative to receive the recording link. Joining me today is our speaker, Jason Snook, Zero Trust and Business Continuity Geek with Quorum and Zero. Jason is a cybersecurity expert with over 20 years of experience leading IT teams. Jason has led and designed enterprise cloud and on-premise system architectures and has successfully defended against various ransomware attacks. With that, I will hand it over to Jason to begin the presentation.
All right, great. Thanks a lot, Marilyn. So, all right, thank you everyone for showing up today. So right out of the gate, why are we here? What are we talking about today? Our main focus today is really to talk about the trends in ransomware. We're going to take a look at 5 really key ransomware variants that have come out just in 2019. We're really going to focus our efforts today on determining what are the targets and how are the targets evolving for ransomware. From that, we're going to jump off. We're going to talk about not just a business continuity platform or solution, but what I think is even more important is a business continuity platform that is secure, that has built-in security so it does not become a target to ransomware. And then we're going to jump over and we're going to talk about what is a zero trust architecture, and I'm going to explain to you why zero trust will prevent ransomware from happening. This is going to take us about 20-25 minutes. We're going to turn it over to questions after that, so let's jump right in. Let's talk about how did we arrive at this list? Well, our ranking system here internally when we did our research was, let's find ransomware variants that are very frequent in 2019. These are, quite frankly, these are the ones that make the news. And then we started to rank them based on their impact from a financial point of view. Not just how much did we find people paid to get out of these ransomware events, but actually what was the rebuild cost associated with this? So right off the top, Manitoba, that's the main one that we came up with. What's the target? Well, it's active processes on Windows machines. It's SQL Server, it's SharePoint. Clock, right? This is one specifically designed to interrupt your insurance policy, right? Your VSS is a technology that allows us to capture backup data and do all kinds of great things with that backup data. But CLOP specifically crawls the network and searches for your backups, tries to lock them. The third one, Barantic, no, those are zeros, not O's. These are targeting Linux systems and config files and IP tables. This is one of the first ransomware news events I found where it was specifically targeting enterprise Linux distributions like Red Hat and CentOS. Aurora, again, the most interesting thing I found about Aurora is that it doesn't rely on tricking a user to get into your network. Instead, it partners with tools such as Mimikatz and brute force technologies to find privileged accounts. Once it has privileged accounts, it causes all kinds of havoc. So Aurora on this list, that's the one that stands out. Now, the last one, Samus, this has actually been around for a while. It seems like it keeps going away and coming back. It specifically hunts for backups. It hunts for backups that reside on Windows systems, specifically on admin shares. There's still a few backup technologies on the market that put their backup repository on a Windows share, and Samus goes out and finds those and will lock the actual backup data themselves. The other interesting thing about Samus is that it is another one that is partnered with Mimikatz and even brute force. So these are the 5 that we came up with. So what is this telling us? So first off, how much damage was caused by some of these? Well, you know, I could create 10 different slides with all of the news-related material that we found when we did our research, but I'm going to highlight 2. The first one is aluminum manufacturing plant. This is this year. This is just in March. So Norsk hydro. They were down for 2 days because of Manitoba. When they were down, they lost the ability to produce, right? They're an aluminum manufacturing company. They were unable to produce at their maximum capacity for 2 full days. Obviously, there's a dollar value tied to that. And it's estimated that the dollar value was about $21 million in lost production. That's not it, though. These guys had to pay, or it's estimated that the cost to recovery and or rebuild, right? You're talking about eradicating the infected machines, using their backups to bring systems back online, the manpower to go out and investigate how did it come in, how do we prevent it from happening again? Neighborhood of $20 million. So the raw impact of lost productivity when you're talking about ransomware, that's not the final dollar that you're going to pay. You can also look at it in terms of what's it going to cost to rebuild. Jackson County in Georgia, this is a county just north of Atlanta, they paid ransomware. The one that got them was Clop, right? And what did it bring down? Well, it brought down emergency operations. It brought down the sheriff's office. So if you're, good on you, if you're a criminal that day, you probably were able to get away with stuff because they couldn't respond, they couldn't book. Their actual booking system was down, so they had to revert back to the old paper booking platform. Here's the challenge. It completely destroyed their backups, right? Their backups were rendered completely useless. So from their point of view, imagine this. You've got your applications that do everything for your accounting from booking to 911 operations and everything in between. Imagine you have to rebuild that from ground up, right? There's no backups to save the day. That's what Clop accomplished, and that's why they paid. So let's talk a little bit about the direction of ransomware. So the direction of ransomware, first off, the historical, right? Ransomware has always been after UNC paths. It's always been after Marion Accounting gets fooled into clicking a link. That link takes her to a special place where she's going to get, some special reward for scanning her machine. And dang it, she got tricked. And what happens? Well, her accounting directory is locked, right? Anything that she had rights to view on the network, that's the first thing that ransomware locked. Pretty straightforward and quite frankly, a total pain in the butt when that happens. But recovering from this, kind of straightforward, right? If ransomware comes in and locks files, don't you realistically just have to find a clean version of them and get them back onto, let's say, a new file server or a clone of the file server? It seems like a pretty easy mechanism to recover. However, modern day ransomware is nothing like legacy ransomware. Modern day ransomware is looking specifically for what are in the industry called PAM accounts, privileged access management. These are high level accounts, right? I'm not talking specifically about the administrator account or the SA account. I'm talking about accounts that you've defined in your, let's say, your LDAP structure that have a higher level of privilege, can access more resources on the environment. And once they have this, right, Mimikatz is a tool that's been around for quite some time. Mimikatz was designed actually for legitimate purpose, but obviously it was released out to the wild, and people are using it to their advantage to sit on customers' networks for years, all with the intent of snipping out a privileged account. Once they define they've got the user and the path, the user ID and the password for a privileged account, it's on. Now you can introduce whatever ransomware you want to make sure that you pay. And are we using one type of ransomware anymore? Heck no, we're using multiple strings or multiple variants at the same time. What are the targets? This is the first takeaway I want you guys to leave this 20 minutes with. The targets are admin shares. The targets are the actual VMDK and VHDX files that allow organizations to run virtual machines. They are RDP, right? Ransomware now has the ability to crawl through RDP and lock machines that way. The one that scares me the most are the backup targets. Imagine your insurance policy is rendered useless by ransomware. Are you going to pay if they also locked your production systems? You're probably not going to have a choice, right? And so this is what today's ransomware and the future of ransomware is looking like. So I want to paint out a couple scenarios for you. Common protection. How do you make sure that ransomware doesn't get in? Well, you've got to have good backups. You've got to have good endpoint and gateway protection, alerting, awareness training, right? We got to make sure that Marion Accounting knows not to get fooled. There's a better way to do this, though. The other way that you can think about this is, sure, do the common protection steps, but also make sure that we talk about secure recovery platforms. I want you to answer this question. Is your business continuity solution, your backup solution, your recovery solution, I don't care what you call it, is it resistant to ransomware? Is it a target, right? And then I want you to look at an idea where you say, okay, instead of building high walls and wide moats, let's just implement an idea that is called zero trust. And that just means that you're only going to trust particular users and applications to look at your data. Okay, so a couple options here to talk about. This is old school, legacy, backup 101. We've got my production systems. I'm going to back it up using a tool. Could be, the old school Windows backup, could be Veritas or old school Veeam. You know where these things hold backup data? They hold them on a Windows server. That kind of stinks. Isn't the Windows OS kind of the target for most ransomware? Of course it is, because it's popular and it's highly vulnerable in certain stages. The other kind of nasty thing about this is that the backup data itself is held on a Windows volume. What are Windows volumes if you unhide them? It's a hidden share, an admin share. Do you think that if I had a privileged account, I could find your admin share and lock everything on it? Absolutely. So the old school way of doing backups, to me, it lacks a lot. It lacks a lot to be desired. How do we build a better solution? Well, here's a different option or different way of doing it. How about we do a business continuity solution that actually takes security seriously and runs on a hardened OS and encrypts all the data in motion and at rest and completely hides the backup repo, right? And can restore if a backup chain is broken. That's the tool that I want us to focus on, is securing the business continuity platform. Let's dive a little deeper into that idea. Again, taking your production systems, backing them up to your DR side or business continuity side. Your backups should be resistant of ransomware. It should be running on an OS that's hardened, that's been through penetration testing, that has minimal threat vectors open to it, right? SSH only would be a nice step. And also, every scrap of backup data that's collected and sent, it should be encrypted. To me, this is the new standard. Nothing should be shared in your infrastructure, not shared architecture, not a shared SAN. It's got to be completely separate. What if ransomware comes in and unlocks half of your array on your SAN, thereby knocking down a handful of VMs? Are you going to recover your VMs to that same array, that same SAN? No, that's a bad idea. Are you going to use credentials that came from the infected environment? No way. Am I going to use an LDAP account that was compromised by Mimikatz to then kick off a recovery event? No, there's no way I'm doing that. This is the new standard. Nothing should be shared. Your backup data, here's a big one. Your backup data, I'm going to use the word, you guys will probably call me on this later, but I'm going to use the word air-gapped. Your backup data should be air-gapped. Meaning if I collect your backup data, I had better be holding it in some place that you can't see. That's completely segmented, right? Think of it as a DMZ for your backup data. This again is something, the approach that I would like people to take away to eliminate the idea or the threat of ransomware and the future of ransomware and their targets. Let's put our backup data in a location that ransomware can't even see. And finally, I could do a whole hour on this, but this is an interesting idea. In the world of backups, we have what's called synthetic incrementals or synthetic full backups. All this means is that we stack a bunch of backups together in a chain, and then we present them as a way to recover. But what happens when a link in the chain is compromised? Can you still recover? This is a question you should ask your business continuity expert or your backup guy on staff or your backup vendor. Ask them this question. Can you recover completely if one of your links is compromised by ransomware? If you inadvertently backed up bad ransomware, what's next, right? This is what a secure backup and recovery and business continuity solution looks like. Now, this is exactly what Corum achieves, okay? Corum has a technology called OnQ. It can live local, it can live remote, it can live up in the cloud or any combination thereof. It is designed to be secure. It's on an OS that routinely gets penetration tested. We do dual encryption in motion and at rest. We run ourselves as an entirely separate stack. Hardware, hypervisor, management, totally separate stack. The key here is the backup repo, the place where we store backup data. You can't see it. You're not going to be able to find it. What about independent backup chains? Absolutely. If I contract ransomware at Monday at 10 a.m. and I run a backup job at Monday at 11 a.m., I backed up bad data. I can, with Corum, pull that link out of the chain and still recover. The main thing here is how fast, right? We want to minimize the dollar value for rebuild time and for downtime. With Corum, your recovery is about 5 minutes. We also have all flash recovery. So if you have high compute systems that need an enormous amount of IOPS, we have a platform built specifically on NVMe cache. Now, let's talk about Zero Trust. Zero Trust is essentially three main principles, right? There are a ton of technology companies these days riding the Zero Trust wave. And what the three principles state is that for every user and program, you should have a way of verifying that they are who they say they are, and they're doing what they're supposed to be doing. This goes well beyond username and password. This is a verification that's either done via an access policy or it's done via technology like multi-factor or dual factor. It's the way that you can verify that a user actually is supposed to access the resource that they're assigned to access. And then you validate, right? You don't give them access yet. You validate the access to the resources. When you do that, you now have the ability to limit the user's impact to not only databases, unstructured data and applications. You can now audit access, right? This is kind of the crown jewel, in my opinion, of Zero Trust. If you said, wait a minute, I now have a easy to use tool that will tell me when a user came in, what they did, what they accessed, and it's all built into the same architecture or same platform, absolutely. That is, from my point of view, that is extremely interesting. Okay, let me share with you a company that does Zero Trust for the crown jewels of the company, which is the data itself. So Ciro is a company that has taken database security and secure data management to a completely new level. What we do at Ciro is we provide Zero Trust, a no perimeter architecture for the data itself, right? Every single database connection can be verified. From that verification, we now get a full live stream into what's happening on the database. We can do a database audit for security and compliance. I can show you a live connection log of who and what is accessing my data. And from that information, I can do risk scoring. I can say, hey, I've got a bunch of shared accounts or service accounts that I didn't know about. Let's go ahead and make sure that those don't become a problem and a reason for a data breach. Zero Trust for data allows you to deploy secure access management, data controls meaning I can literally obfuscate and encrypt data as it leaves the database, ensuring that not only ransomware doesn't have a chance, but there won't be a data breach, right? I can literally make sure that social security numbers in my database do not go outbound unless they're going to a trusted and a verified source. You can also do digital moves with it. So the idea that we have to build and deploy a new firewall and then write a bunch of pinhole rules to open up that firewall for business to be productive, those are gone. There's no need for that. You can now do a zero perimeter architecture specifically for the data, right? So we're at just shy of 20 minutes. The main takeaways that I want to see you guys, the main takeaways that I'd like to ask you to pose of you and your team and your organization are answer these questions. Are the backups secure? Have you taken the steps to actually analyze the backups and make sure they're not running on a system that is a target of ransomware? And then finally, once you go through that, ask yourself, if ransomware, clock came into your environment and locked your VSS snapshots, can you still recover? Will your backup technology be resilient enough to recover from that type of ransomware? If you were to give me your admin account, a privileged account, would you still be able to block me from preventing an outage? That's the question here. That's the question at hand. And the next piece is do your research on Zero Trust architecture, right? Ciro does Zero Trust for the database. However, there's Zero Trust architecture for almost all aspects of IT today. You can do it for remote desktop. You can obviously do it for applications. You can start tearing down some of the borders and barriers that we put up in the last couple decades, and instead make your business a little faster because you get efficient use of data, and while increasing security. Final thing before I kick it back over to Marilyn, what we're offering here is the help you to answer this question. Can you recover from an attack? Now, if you type yes in the question box, then we're going to reach out to you and we're going to schedule an assessment. The assessment is going to look at your current backup recovery and business continuity solution, and we're going to help you assess whether or not it's a secure platform and you will be able to recover from ransomware. With that, Marilyn, I'm going to kick it back over to you.
Great, thank you, Jason. Now we will go to the questions box for some questions. Please enter your questions into the question box and we'll answer them. We have a question right now from Cedric, and he's asking, how can you protect your database from ransomware?
Yeah, I mean, some of the variants that we're seeing are specifically looking at databases, and quite frankly, the reason being is you're most likely to pay if you can't access your databases, which are serving up your critical information to your applications, right? This is a business killer. So how do you prevent it? Well, again, you make sure that the clone of the database that your business continuity solution has created, make sure that it's secure. Make sure you follow the 3-2-1 rule, which is 3 copies plus an offsite. And make sure that you do routine testing, right? Not only testing your recovery ability, but actually do a penetration test against your business continuity provider. Make sure, are they resilient? What can you find, right? If I had assume the worst, assume I had the admin account. When I have the admin account, could I corrupt or lock your backups? Ask those questions. Those are the main ways that you can prevent ransomware from happening.
Great, thank you. Our next question is from Dave. How does Quorum recover servers infected by ransomware attacks?
So think of it this way. Corum, every time we process a backup job, you can do as many as you want per day. Every single backup job we process is a bootable clone. So if you inadvertently back up an infected clone, no problem. We'll just tag it and mark it as a clone that you will not introduce onto your network. You can then roll back in time, and let's say at Monday at 10 o'clock, that's when ransomware started. You roll back to Monday at 9 a.m. and you run the server from the Quorum full stack business continuity solution, as opposed to sitting there and waiting for a giant file level restore to happen. You can be back up and running in less than 5 minutes from a ransomware attack with Quorum.
Great. Moving on to our next question from Michael. What happens if an infected backup makes its way to the cloud? Can I still recover?
That's a great question, right? I mean, the idea that, still we're on the subject of what do we do if we inadvertently back up bad data and then we replicate it out to the cloud? Well, again, can your backup provider pull an infected link out of the chain, so to speak? If the answer is no, then you should probably look elsewhere. If the answer is yes, then test it, right? I'm a huge fan of testing solutions before the actual event happens. So if you are backing up to the cloud, run a full DR test that doesn't step on production, and actually run it from a previous point in time. Make sure that application servers can speak to one another. Make sure you've got an active, LDAP server where you can provide authentication. The basic stuff of the basic premise of a business continuity test is to literally put your eyes on the ability to write a run book that's going to allow you to recover.
Great, thank you, Jason. Our next question is, what differs Quorum from Barracuda Backup Service?
Yeah, I mean, keeping up with different vendors is, that could be a full-time job because we're always changing, right? We're always adding new features. Like Quorum's adding a feature where you can instantly replicate SQL transactions, meaning no more downtime for SQL. We're also rolling out tools like that allow us to protect high compute nodes. So we have this, new all-flash system. My history and understanding of Barracuda, they've always been a really good backup-only solution. but put them to the test. Ask them to recover 10 servers within 5 minutes, and ask them, can you do that in the cloud and on-prem, right? Those are the questions that you could ask Barracuda. My understanding of them is they still do a really good job of backing up systems. They still provision enough storage both locally on their local on-prem appliance as well as cloud. But I think the challenge there is the speed of recovery. But again, I mean, it's, keeping up with all of the backup and recovery, the insurance providers in our space, that could be a full-time job on its own.
Thank you, Jason, and thank you, Trevor, for that question. Next, we have a question from Pat. Do you have advice on how to determine when ransomware locked files, services, etc.?
Yeah, so there's a couple different ways. Now, there are tools out there in the world that are paid and free that will allow you to go and backtrace based on the attribute, right? So the old school way of doing it was you would find the file that was encrypted that you can't actually open. You would pull the metadata on it, and inside the metadata you'll find change, or you'll find a change tag on it. And on that change tag, you'll be able to dig in and find out what the user account was. From there, you can back channel back and you say, okay, Marion Accounting, you were the offender. But how do you actually figure out the actual full impact of ransomware? There's actually a better way, I think, to do this, and that is to actually look at how much data has changed in your environment, right? When ransomware happens, what's it doing? It's actually making an attribute change on all of your files. Well, if you have a way of looking at the change rate of your servers and create a baseline, let's say your baseline is 5% change per day, and all of a sudden you see a spike, and on Tuesday morning at 10, the change rate jumped to 75%. That's an indicator that is the time and point that ransomware woke up and started locking files. So the question becomes, how do you investigate your change rate? Well, as a backup vendor like Corum, we see your change rate for you, and we actually show you in a very specific report your change rate. The idea behind that is we're not just an insurance company. We're trying to provide value to what we are collecting. So we'll show you the heavy hitters in your environment as far as who's changing the most on a daily basis, how long does it take to get data out of the building. But more importantly, from an investigative point of view, we're going to show you the moment in time ransomware drove that change rate through the roof.
Thanks, Jason. Our next question is from Carlos. Can ransomware target backup tapes?
That's a great question. I actually haven't seen where ransomware is specifically going after tapes. Obviously, once the tape is unmounted, it becomes a very secure form of backup. But while the tape is mounted, sure, I would assume that there are variants that could go out there and prevent that application from writing to tape. Tape has its own pluses and minuses. Being a previous IT director for a company for years, we relied heavily on tapes. I mean, A, that was kind of the gold standard in backups, but B, I liked the idea of having long-term retention at my fingertips. What I didn't like was the speed of recovery. So when you have to recover with tape, it's kind of a process. I'm not shedding any new light on this subject for anyone. It's kind of a pain, kind of takes a long time. And the world that we live in today, where it's this, always on mentality, tape it doesn't cut it for speed of recovery. It's got its pros, but the cons are speed. I mean, that's my opinion of it.
Great. And now for our last question, we have 2 minutes left here from Arco. Is OnQ comparable to Dado?
Absolutely. Yeah. I mean, Dado, again, it's another product on the market that's designed to back up systems and replicate those systems elsewhere, to the DR, to the cloud. The main change that I see with Dado is Dado does everything by bolting together their technology, right? It's a white box hardware with StorageCraft running with an overlay to all of that with this nice dashboard. Where they have challenges, again, is speed of recovery and speed of performance once it's up and running. Again, this may have changed, but the last time we spoke with customers who are unhappy with their Dado environment, we were talking to them because they had an active outage, and their experience with not only the performance of the recovery, but the performance of the clones once they were running was not adequate, and they were also frustrated with the level of support, right? And again, this stuff could have changed. I'm not really sure. Yeah, I would say Corum is on par with some core functionality of Dado. I like to think that we take speed and security to a completely new level that Dado does not, but I encourage everyone to do their own vendor homework.
Great, thank you, Jason. And with that, we're right at the half-hour time here, so we'll wrap it up. Thank you, everyone, for joining us today. Please reach out to Jason or myself if you have any questions following the session, and we look forward to seeing you on our next webinar. Thank you.